Dr. Sarfati. I've known him for a number of years and participating in different conferences, and he is the chief scientist at Creation Ministries International, has been for a number of years, and he has a doctorate in chemistry, physical chemistry. And he is a researcher and a very prolific writer. He writes a lot of articles that are posted on the CMI website and has written a large number of books. And one of the largest books is an 800-page commentary on the first 11 chapters of Genesis, which is very unique because it is a theological, historical, and scientific commentary on the first 11 chapters of Genesis. And he'll have many copies of that out there if you're interested. So he's going to speak on the topic of bioethics, and particularly looking at issues of life, issues of death, and issues of morality. And so I won't go into any detail on that now. We will have him give this lecture, and then as usual, we'll have a period of Q&A afterwards. So think about questions you might want to ask them. So with that, Jonathan, come on up. Passing a clipboard around for those of you that are not already on our email distribution list. Many of you are, I know, but if you're new to this, you're welcome to sign up for that. You'll be informed of all the meetings coming up and all the evidence for creation that we have on the website.
Well, thank you. Nice to see a good crowd on a Friday night, and many thanks to the Apologetics Forum for putting this on for us. I mean, very well organized and very hospitable, very helpful group they are. So please get behind the Apologetics Forum here, because they're putting on so many things here. You can see how many things they're putting on, and it's a labor of love for all of them too. So this talk about, I want to mention where I'm coming from. You know I'm not from this country by now, I suppose, right? It doesn't take people long to figure that out, you know. Just a bit of a geography lesson for you. Yeah, so I come from this country, but I moved over here 9 years ago, and one reason is we have two granddaughters who live in Florida, okay, so it's easy to visit grandkids when they're in the same country as opposed to over thousands of miles of ocean. Now, I'm also a Ph.D. scientist. I used to shine lasers onto selenium ring molecules. I look at the scattered lights and publish the work in scientific journals. So I'm a real scientist, Ph.D. chemistry. Dr. Lee Klammer is a Ph.D. physicist. So there are quite a few of us around. And another thing, I'm also ethnically Jewish. My name is the Hebrew word for Frenchman, so I can tell Jewish jokes and French jokes and get away with it, okay? And so quite a few things there, but I work for Creation Ministries International. We have a website called creation.com, okay? That has over 13,000 articles on it. Every day it's updated with something new. Okay, and has a section on what I'm talking about tonight, some articles on these sorts of topics, but also, of course, things on dinosaurs, on radioactive dating, the authority of the Bible, all the doctrines of Christianity and how to defend them. And you might say there are two different aspects of it. Is creation true, and does it matter? And one way to be connected with this, and some of you may already be aware of this, is our free email newsletter, which tells you articles we've had in the past, like Should We Trust the Bible? I wrote that a while back. But also articles coming up, and some brand new articles coming up, as well as creation speakers in your area. So if you want to be part of our newsletter, we have some sign-up sheets which will be coming around, and all you need to do is put your name and your address, so we can email address, so we can send it to you. So you guys ready for the clipboards? Yeah, thank you. Go for it. Thanks very much for that. Yeah, and we promise not to spam you or to give or sell your address away to a third party. We will protect your privacy. It won't go on any other mailing lists, and we're not going to fill your email inbox with spam. Okay, so we'll be very judicious about it. Now, as far as resources here, there's resources from the Apologetics Forum, which are different from the ones from the Creation Ministries, where we don't overlap. So. And one of the topics for tonight is an earlier version of this talk. It's my video called Bioethics. It was filmed when I did an earlier version of the talk I'm giving tonight. And of course, my Genesis commentary actually has issues of bioethics. And it's probably one of the few commentaries you get which talk about abortion and cloning. And you won't find that in many other commentaries. And you won't find commentaries talking about dinosaurs and how old the earth is. As well as linking it, the Genesis, to the rest of Christianity by showing how the New Testament and Jesus quote Genesis and how all the doctrines of Christianity had their beginnings in the early chapters of Genesis. So I want to go through what I'm going to talk about here. You see, one thing, it makes a big difference in what you believe. Who you believe, what you believe makes a difference to everything else you believe. So there's a big difference if we believe it's a creator, God who made us, therefore he would own us and has the right to make the rules for us. And because he loves us, he makes rules for our good. But if there's no moral lawgiver, how could there be moral laws? That's a problem, to try to work out ethics apart from a divine lawgiver. And I'm going to go through a fair few topics, which are hot topics in the news. I mean, of course, you're all pretty aware of the terrible things going on in Virginia and New York, where they're quite happy with aborting babies right up to birth and even beyond. In the case of the Virginia governor, let's decide whether we can kill it after he's born. I mean, so how far have we come that this is even thinkable, let alone the state, the policy of the state? I mean, so really there's a lot to fight back against. Now, I want to just show you our authority. See, Jesus said Scripture cannot be broken. So for Jesus, whatever Scripture said is what God said. So this is where God has revealed his moral law in Scripture. Scripture is totally divine. Jesus affirmed that it's totally divinely inspired, inerrant. And he rebuked the Sadducees by saying, have you not read what was spoken to you by God? You see, what you read in Scripture is what God has spoken to us. On every area it talks about. And of course, for a lot of my talk is about the fact that it speaks accurately when it discusses science and history. But it also speaks accurately when it discusses morality. You see, the thing is, if we can't trust the Bible on its history, including creation in 6 days, about 6,000 years ago, and things like the global flood that I talked about last night, why should we trust it on the moral teachings it has either? And you know what the word Bible stands for? Basic instructions before leaving earth. Now, a lot of people, I'm afraid, have fallen into a trap of trying to keep religion out of their moral issues. But the point is, here is what the problem is. If you separate the religious and the scientific, means separating religion from the truth, from the truth, and that means religion dies among true men. This was said over 100 years ago, very prescient, this man. And this is basically what's happened. The separation of religious and scientific means that now religion is put into a different category and is supposed to stay in church and maybe even not being allowed there either. The thing is, you see, Jesus said, if I told you earthly things and you don't believe, how can you believe if I tell you heavenly things? See the point about how we've got to trust the Bible from the first verse if we're going to be credible as witnesses on anything else we talk about. And it's interesting, Mike Adams, who's a Christian, he converted to Christianity after he became a professor, and of course he won a discrimination case against his university. He said, if Christianity dies in America, it'll not be for a lack of evidence of its truthfulness, it'll be for a lack of dissemination of the evidence. So who's going to disseminate? That's what the Apologetics Forum is about. That's what Creation Ministries is about. That's what the church and the home needs to be about, disseminating this evidence. Now the thing is it's actually not a case of religion or no religion. It's a struggle between two rival religions. Evolution is very much a religion. I think it's very important to understand. It's a religious belief. And this is an admission by an atheistic philosopher who testified against the creationists at the Arkansas creation trial around 81, I think it was. Okay, but he admits, much later he admitted that evolution is a religion, a full-fledged alternative to Christianity with meaning and morality. Evolution is a religion. It was true of evolution in the beginning. It's true of evolution still today. It's an explicit substitute for Christianity. These are guys admitting that evolution is just as much a religion as Christianity is. So why should that be the default religion of the courts and the education system and the moral decision makers in this country? Why should they be the ones to impose their religious beliefs while Christians are supposed to keep theirs at home? Now, the thing is, if evolution is true, then there's no ultimate basis for right and wrong, because here's an admission from two evolutionists, Jean Lanier, who said that a lot of people are uncomfortable with accepting evolution because it leads to what they perceive as a moral vacuum in which their best impulses have no basis in nature. And Richard Dawkins, famous atheist and Darwinist, he says that's just tough. We have to face up to the truth. So he's admitting if evolution is true, what logically follows is there's no moral impulse. There's no such thing as right and wrong if evolution is true. We're just the result of survival of the fittest. And that's the logical outcome of trying to believe in evolution. Here's another admission.
Let me summarize my views on what modern evolutionary biology tells us loud and clear. And I must say that these are basically Darwin's views. There are no gods, no purposive forces of any kind, no life after death. When I die, I am absolutely certain that I'm going to be completely dead. That's just all that's going to be the end of me. There is no ultimate foundation for ethics, no ultimate meaning in life, and no free will for humans either.
So evolution is true. It means there's no ultimate foundation for ethics, which means there's no right and wrong. He says so. This is one of the leading evolutionists admitting this. It's not just me trying to knock down a straw man. This is what the evolutionists themselves are saying. Evolution is true. It means there's no right or wrong ultimately. No ultimate meaning for life. We're just rearranged pond scum who are just going to become fertilizer. And no free will for humans, which means he couldn't help saying that. Okay, now I want to show you a clip from a classic British comedy. So just bear with me. There's a reason I'm showing this clip, even though it's a 70s British comedy. Okay, so the humour is British humour, so just bear with it. Okay, but there's a reason I'm showing you this. Yeah, so this is from Fawlty Towers in about 1975, thereabouts, okay? There's a reason I'm showing you this, because Richard Dawkins wrote an article about this very thing. I'm going to show you where evolution leads consistently. He's commenting on this clip here. And he says, of course, we laugh at his irrationality. Instead of beating the car, we'd investigate the problems. So why don't we laugh at a judge who punishes a criminal just as heartily as we laugh at Basil Fawlty? That's a very weird thing to say, don't you think? Yeah. Well, I'll tell you why he says that, though. We want to take a picture of this. Okay, Okay, the thing is, concepts like blame and responsibility are bandied around freely when human wrongdoers are concerned, but doesn't a truly scientific mechanistic view of the nervous system make nonsense of the very idea of responsibility? And he says, why don't we find it hard to accept those such conclusions? Because mental concepts like blame and responsibility, even evil and good, are built into our brains by millennia of Darwinian evolution. It's interesting. So he thinks it's just as irrational to punish a human criminal as it is to punish a car. Because as far as he's concerned, we're both different types of machines. There's no ultimate value in humanity. But he's been consistent with his atheistic evolutionary viewpoint. But that's the point. That's where it logically leads. There's no ultimate right or wrong. There's no good or evil under an evolutionary worldview. But then he's quite hypocritical. People can't live by such a stupid idea because he says creationists are evil. Pick one. There's no good or evil or creationists are evil. You can't have it both ways, can you? But I never accuse evolutionists of being consistent, though. That's the thing. Now, what about the idea of religion not interfering with politics? Well, this is a quote. I want to see if you can guess the context of this. Things have come to a pretty pass when religion is allowed to invade public life. Do you know where this comes from? Actually, this was in the context of the slavery debate in the UK. This is a British Prime Minister, a good friend of Queen Victoria, Lord Melbourne, and he was saying this about the abolitionists, and the English abolitionists were almost exclusively evangelicals. In fact, today, people would denounce these guys as the religious right if they were alive today. Same belief system. There was a religious right who actually were at the forefront of abolishing slavery in England, led by William Wilberforce. And he was attacking them for bringing their religion into the political arena of slavery. But clearly it was a moral thing. Wilberforce, it was his deep Christian conviction that led him to realize that slavery was an abomination. And it was based on this that he campaigned for decades against the worldwide evil of slavery. So it's a very interesting thing that this idea of keep your religion out of politics was used against a lot of the best social reforms of history. He says, don't fall for this. Now, one thing to understand for Christian ethics is to understand there's a difference between man and animals. You see, humans, God made male and female in his image. Animals are not made in his image. The non-human animals aren't in God's image. Humans, both male and female, are in his image. And also they have dominion over the rest of creation. But they don't have dominion over other humans. But first of all, let's explain what dominion is. Radah is the Hebrew word, but it doesn't mean oppressive dominion. Remember, this is before the fall. The fall is Genesis chapter 3. So this is still a benign, perfect, a very good creation we're talking about there. So the dominion here is a benign dominion, a responsible stewardship, like in this passage here. Talking about Solomon, he had dominion, Radah again, and he had peace on all sides around them. So this is a case of dominion being a good thing. And that's what humans were meant to do with the rest of creation, responsible stewardship over the rest of it. Now the point is, animals are different from humans. Now the difference here is to note is between animal rights and animal welfare. See, animal welfare opposes cruelty. And that's interesting that William Wilberforce, who was the most famous slavery abolitionist in England, he was also a founder of the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. He thought it was a moral thing to avoid cruelty to animals. Okay, so it's a very interesting thing there. Okay, that's one thing, but there's a different thing, animal rights, where you actually raise animals to the same level as humans. And that should be avoided because humans are made in God's image, animals are not. So that's a pernicious idea, but often it smuggles into it. Here's one of the PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. You always make a joke about it, says people for eating tasty animals. We see how she degrades a rat as a pig, as a dog as a boy, and invents this idea of speciesism, where why should humans be special over any other animal? Okay, what other animal is arguing for this case, though? That's the question. Only humans are even arguing like that. Okay. Now, the point is, okay, see, the problem is people think they're helping animal welfare, but they're actually helping this pernicious animal rights activists instead, which is a totally different issue. Okay, and the thing is, the point is it works both ways. If you elevate animals up to humans, it can go the other way. It can bring humans down to the animals, you see. See, when you say make things equal, is it equal down here or equal up here? And that's, I think, the problem with some of the politics. They want everyone down here, it seems. But the point is that this is a very bad thing. And we see, when you think of Peter Singer, he's, unfortunately, he comes from my home country. I'm sorry to one of the people I don't really want to admit to. Okay, now he's an atheist and an evolutionist. Now, he's a very ardent animal rights supporter, but when it comes to human rights, he's appallingly bad. You see, that's what I'm talking about. By elevating animals, he downgrades humanity. See, he supports abortion. In fact, he supports infanticide, which is I think abortion is infanticide, okay? Both things are killing babies. I'm using infanticide here to say killing the baby after birth. Okay, he supports both before and after because he says, what's the difference? Well, there isn't a difference, is there, really? But he's actually consistent in the wrong direction. Oh, if he can kill them before birth, why not kill them after birth? So he's very open about infanticide. So he'd be very welcome in the state of Virginia, it looks like. And even bestiality. It's a really shocking thing. He just says how depraved these guys get. He's with their evolution, with their animal rights, which ends up downgrading humans. Dawkins is another one. He thinks that Down syndrome babies have less rights than pigs, okay? I pity any Down syndrome people here, who, of course, are just as human as anyone else. But that's the terrible results of this philosophy. And it is speciesism, which means putting human species above other species, as bad as sexism or racism. But again, under evolution, what do you mean by bad? Hang on, you just said there's no such thing as good or evil, so what do you mean just as bad? It makes no sense. You see, there's no consistency to their argument. They had to keep on hijacking the Christian worldview, which talks about good and bad, to try to argue their case. They can't argue it consistently under their own case. So the thing is, be careful when you're trying to argue this. It's not saying that atheists can't be moral. The argument is that atheists have no basis under their own belief system for morality. That's the actual claim. Now let's look at a very important book for the atheists. It's this one here you may have heard of. And it's interesting, the subtitle, The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. That's actually a very ominous subtitle, as we will see. Now, his cousin actually was the founder of Eugenics, which means the science of being well-born, okay? And that's the idea that just as we breed animals for good properties and kill the bad ones that aren't suitable, let's do the same thing for humans. And it was Darwin's own cousin who founded Eugenics. But then it continued. In fact, it was Darwin's own children who continued the eugenics business. In the First World War, the eugenics movement looked like a Darwin family business. Darwin's son Leonard replaced his cousin Galton as chairman of the National Eugenics Society. And then it goes on. Three leading members were three more of Charles Darwin's own sons, this eugenics society. It's an appalling thing. So the idea, Darwin was most definitely a social Darwinist, despite what some people say, because his own cousin and four of his sons were right involved with the horrific eugenics movement, which we'll see became incredibly bad in the early part of last century. But then we get into the first decades of the 20th century, and you have the rise of the Second Reich, which is the Kaiser the Germany of Bismarck and the Kaiser is the Second Reich. The Third Reich, you know what that is, of course. But the Second Reich was the Kaiser's Germany, and the First Reich was the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, just so in case you're wondering, the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire, but there you go. That was the 1,000-year Reich that Hitler was trying to get back to. The point is, in Second World War, there was a lot of Darwinism in the Second Reich Germany. Hitler was sort of continuing it to an alarming degree, but a lot of the seeds of what became the Nazi Revolution were already sown in the Kaiser's Germany. Like you have this man called Trota, who did a genocide in Namibia, in West Africa. The Herero people, he was intentionally wiping out the Herero people. This is sort of forgotten Holocaust before World War I. So the most infamous Holocaust was not the first one committed by evolutionized Germans. It happened before World War I. Extermination of an African tribe, many thousands of people. And here's a book about this. You see, we've got Darwin's On Origin of Species with his brutally materialistic account of nature as survivalism was made to serve as justification of the extermination of Namibian tribes, and later for Hitler's biological anti-Semitism. You see, the Hitler's belief system didn't grow in a vacuum. It had a lot of earlier precedents, because he had the machinery to carry it out on such a terrible scale. But then, after World War I, you have this very ominous book by a lawyer, Carl Binding, and a psychiatrist, Alfred Hocher. And the point is that the book was called Allowing the Annihilation of Life Unworthy of Life. That's a really horrible thing, because who decides what's unworthy? If God has made us in his image, there's no such thing as unworthy life. But that's the point of things. So this is 1920. Okay, so you get the timeline here, because then 4 years later, a much more infamous book came out. But you can clearly see, even if he hadn't read this book here, the ideas were certainly very much floating around in that culture of the time, when the Weimar Republic was all around. And he says it's a half measure to let incurably sick people contaminate the remaining healthy ones. So what else does he say? It'll spare millions of unfortunates undeserved suffering, and consequently will lead to rising improvement of health as a whole. You see, he was justifying the killing of sick people, of handicapped people. So the euthanasia program was very much in line with the annihilation of unworthy human life. So in fact, the Nazi death camps got their beginnings in the Eugenics program, is wiping out the handicapped people. And it's unfortunate, when you've got a culture like that, everyone gets sucked into this horrible thing. You see, in fact, it's a sad thing that often the medical profession was one of the deadliest until we had the actual extermination camps. It was the nurse with a syringe and her pills who were the most dangerous women in Germany. That's what happened there, because they imbibed this terrible philosophy. And this is why you have, after the war, you have a British evolutionist, Sir Arthur Keith, saying the German Führer is an evolutionist. He's consciously sought to make the practice of Germany conform to the theory of evolution. So it's very accepted that Hitler was trying to impose evolutionary ideas on Germany. And I'll show you one of the propaganda films from Nazi German area at times before World War II broke out, which I think will show you what they're talking about.
Menschen haben gegen dieses Gesetz der natürlichen Auslese in den letzten Jahrzehnten furchtbar gesündigt. Wir haben unwertes Leben nicht nur erhalten, wir haben ihm auch Vermehrung gewährt. Die Nachkommen dieser Kranken sahen so aus, in denen Tausende lallende Schwachsinnige künstlich ernährt und gepflegt werden müssen, die tiefer stehen als jedes Tier.
But it's a point, you've got this terrible thing. In fact, it says we have sinned grievously against the law of natural selection by allowing these handicapped people to live who are lower than the beasts. That's the sort of thing. This is clearly evolutionary propaganda here. Even talking about sinning, gesündigt in Germany means sinned. more than transgressed. Okay, so sinned against the law of natural selection by allowing people like that to live. You see, instead of treating them as human beings who need help, they were people who needed to be put in prisons and murdered. And that's the sort of the problem thing. And lower than the beasts, instead of being in God's image, they were put lower than the animals. So this is the sort of philosophy that governed Nazi German policies. In fact, there's books here by Dr. Richard Weikart, who's a professor of modern European history. One of the first book he wrote is called From Darwin to Hitler. He's written a lot of other things here, like Hitler and the Nazi German worldview. He's written a few books on, even a book called Hitler's Religion is a sequel to this one, showing that Hitler was sort of like an evolutionary pantheist. He wasn't really an atheist classically. He said he was a very anti-Christian. We know from documents that the Nazis had planned to wipe out the Christian church in Germany had they won the war. First kill the Jews, the Christians were going to be next. That was very much clear in the documents produced in the Nuremberg trials that they're going to wipe out Christianity. That was their plan. But he wasn't such an atheist as an evolutionary pantheist. Okay, so let's see what else has been said. Here's an interesting point by a Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl. And he said, if we present a concept of man which is not true, we may well corrupt him. And what's the concept is he talking about? The gas chambers of Auschwitz were the ultimate consequence of a theory that man is nothing but the product of heredity and environment, or as the Nazis like to say, of blood and soil. Yeah, so he could see very clearly the evolutionary basis of the terrible Holocaust. And the thing is, once you start to decide one class of life is not worthy of protecting, where do we start? Where do we stop? You see, Dr. Leo Alexander was a medical doctor who decided what was going on. How could Germany fall so far behind that this terrible atrocity could happen? And he said the Holocaust started with the attitude that there was such a thing as life not worthy to be lived. That's the book I told you from 1920, Life Unworthy of Life. And the thing is, once you start that, the sphere of those to be included was enlarged. So you start with a small group of people, then you add more and more people to it, political enemies. And so you got the infinitely small wedge lever was the attitude towards the non-rehabilitable sick. Is that where it started? But it never stops there. And if you want to see a classic movie on that, I mean, it's fictionalized, based on real life, called Judgment at Nuremberg. And you have one of the defendants saying, these people, these millions of people, I never knew it would come to that. You must believe it. And the trial judge, played by Spencer Tracy, said, it came to that the first time you sentenced a man to death, you knew to be innocent. Once you start down that track, where do you stop? Okay, so there's a lot of different things we could talk about with Hitler. In fact, the video, in fact, this book here, The Evolution of Achilles' Heels, you may be familiar with that, but the last chapter of this book actually goes into the moral aspects of evolution, including the Holocaust. In fact, this video even shows the same Nazi propaganda clip. It's interesting, in fact, there's a debate between Frank Turek, a Christian who's an old earth Christian, and Michael Shermer about whether God is needed for morality. And he actually quoted from my little section in this one, talking about the Holocaust, but all he said, he's a Jewish man talking about the Holocaust. Well, it's true. I mean, he's not lying, but I didn't want to say he's a young earth creationist talking about the Holocaust. That wouldn't suit him. But anyway, that's all right. I'm glad he's at least paying attention to this. Now, the thing is, it's not just Nazi Germany. See, the United States also fell into this terrible thing around the same time as Nazi Germany. See, because then you got this book called Hunter's Civic Biology. Now, you might remember this because this was the book that was on trial, this famous Scopes trial of 1925. It was about whether you should be allowed to teach this book in the high schools. This was the textbook they were teaching from, Hunter's Civic Biology. So I want to show you some things that this terrible book was teaching. This is a passage here. I'm just blowing it up here. The races of man. There are 5 races or varieties of man, very different from the others. And then finally, the highest type of all, the Caucasians. You see, very overt white supremacist nonsense in this book. This is taught to American high school kids, and the ACLU defended teaching this book. But again, this is a typical thing back in those days. Before World War II, evolutionists were largely racists. Now it's not fashionable to be a racist, but again, that's not because of evolution. They've tried to hide the terrible racist past of evolution, and basically adopted the biblical worldview. There's only one race, the race of Adam. That's the biblical worldview, and hopefully the race of the last Adam, those who are saved in Jesus, the last Adam. But here's the terrible things that was taught in America. And you have things like eugenics was being taught. You see, eugenics was everywhere. It was very popular in the Western world. The science of being well-born is called eugenics. And just as certain animals or plants become parasitic, these families have become parasitic on societies. You've got these terrible things. You've got these tales, these morality tales about the supposedly bad genes in certain human beings who are perfectly decent people, but just put in asylum because of contrived, trumped-up tests, and they spend their lives in asylum because of this. And it gets worse than this. Now, if such people were lower animals, we'd probably kill them off to prevent them from breeding. That's what Hitler wanted to do anyway. That's the thing. Hitler just carried it to the next logical step because humans are no different from animals, so why not carry out this logical step? But humanity will not allow this. We have the remedy of separating the sexes in asylums and preventing intermarriage, and they've been tried successfully in Europe, you see, because they knew what happened in Germany, the Second Reich Germany. And that's when you have laws against mixed-race marriage coming up a lot, you see, because of these sorts of ideas, preventing marriage between different races. That was the sort of thing, preventing intermarriage with the so-called inferior races. That was very popular in those days. A book was written called War Against the Weak, and I reviewed that in the Creation magazine, creation.com/weak. I reviewed it fairly briefly. And that documents some of the eugenics practices in this country. And you see, it seems that Germans, the Nazi Germany, may have picked up some of their ideas from the American eugenicists. They were cross-fertilizing each other because America actually had forced sterilization of 60,000 people against their will. And it went as far as the Supreme Court, the case called Buck v. Bell. We have Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. saying 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. And he approves forced sterilization of that family. And many thousands, as you see, 60,000 were sterilized against their will in the American eugenics program. So this became a bit discredited and washed under the rug after World War II because we're putting Nazis on trial. It wouldn't be very good if, in fact, they could say, well, you did the same thing as we did. In fact, in the judgment in the Nuremberg trial, the Nazi defendants tried that on too. And very hard to answer that when they quoted the American Supreme Court case supporting just what they did. So they basically, well, we're going to put you on trial, so you can't do that. So can't do that anymore. Yeah, but that's the sort of thing. It did happen. That's the thing. And if it happened in the past, what's to stop it happening in the future? So then there are other things like the end-of-life treatment. That's the euthanasia. And the problem is the euthanasia, as we've written a few things on our website about euthanasia. You got things like this man, Jack Kevorkian. And it's interesting, he just loved to kill people. He's dead now, but he loved to kill people. In fact, he killed people who were probably healthier than he was. He's probably old and decrepit by the time, but he was still killing people who were healthier than him. And things once you get euthanasia, one thing that's not going to happen is pain relief and palliative care. You see, often what happens is people who are terminally ill or very incurably ill, they just want something for their pain and things like that. They may feel depressed temporarily and want to end everything, but once they've got their pain relief, they're actually very grateful that their request for suicide was not granted. Once it's granted, it's too late to go back, you see. So they're very grateful. So what you're doing, you don't want to kill depressed people. And that's what, if you have euthanasia, you're going to kill people at a low point of life and not give them a chance to recover from that low point. And the thing is, why spend money on palliative care, that's the pain killing and other sort of making people comfortable at the end of their lives? Well, why should you spend money on that if you can just knock them off? So as euthanasia goes up, palliative care comes down. It's a very dangerous thing. And then they talk about how they get these laws in, like in Oregon, you see. They talk about safeguards. The point is the safeguards are always to get the laws passed, you see. They don't want to explain what they really want to do because it wouldn't get past the lawmakers. So they get these laws passed with the so-called safeguards, but then they attack the safeguards. You see, it's like a camel's nose in the tent. Once it's in, it gets the camels in the whole tent and you're out of the tent. So the safeguard happens, the laws then, and then the safeguards that they defended are now attacked as being unconstitutional, which is the favorite buzzword they use for anything they don't like, or too restrictive. You see, that's the sort of the trick they do. Like I'll explain with the abortion issue, the same sort of thing is going to happen. What about all these hard cases, rape and incest and all that? They want abortion on demand for any reason at all because you can't fit in a prom dress or whatever. But they pretend it's about these hard cases. Same with this issue here. Pretend about the hard cases, but they really want open slather. So here's one admission by a euthanasia advocate. It has a 15-day waiting period. A 15-day waiting period was to be struck down as unduly burdensome, but you need to convince people that it's suitably protective, so they put this 15-day waiting period to make it seem like it's protecting people. Then as soon as it gets in, chop it off. But the thing is, why should we expect fair play from people who believe we're rearranged pond scum? That's a problem. I think we're too trusting sometimes when, in fact, under their worldview, they've got no reason to play fair. We play fair because we've got a worldview that says play fair. But they don't play fair always. Now, when it comes to the abortion issue, see, evolution has a lot to say about that because we have, you may have seen this in textbooks. How many times have you seen this in textbooks? That's still in textbooks today. It's totally been disproven decades ago. It's got no business being there. The idea that somehow all these embryos are similar because we all evolved from a common ancestor. But in fact, this is a total forgery. They're very different. All the embryos are different right from the start. So how do we find textbook with the top line still there? It's false education. This is a fraudulent pictures used to prove evolution. But also it's used to support the abortion issue because, I mean, you tell the girl who's desperate and pregnant, it's only going through the fish stage or something like that. No, it's not. It's going through the human stage. It's a different phase of the human stage. But it's human right from the beginning. Okay, so when it comes to the argument of the sanctity of life, let's go through a bit of logic here. I like to use logic if I can. And one reason, Jesus in John 1 is called, in the beginning was the Word. In the Greek, it's in the beginning was the Logos, okay? Logos is where we get logic from. So part of being Christ-like is being logical. So let's look at this. See, a sound argument is a valid argument with true premises. Here's actually a 4D ultrasound of a baby in the womb, okay? He's a bit camera shy, that's why he's putting his hand up, okay? It'd be nice to have these sort of pictures on billboards in New York and Virginia, actually.
Yes, it would.
I mean, just to show the truth, but that's the thing, they don't want everyone to see the truth. This is just real science. We're the ones who are pro-science. They're the ones who are science deniers. See, so abortion is intentional killing of a fetus. That's the definition of the word. Now, okay, and I want to say that fetus is an innocent human being. That's the premise. That's the premise I'm going to tell you, because it hasn't committed any crime. We're talking about innocent in the term, it means there's no crime that's been committed that's worthy of death. Okay, intentionally killing an innocent human being is murder. It should be obvious from the Bible. And God forbids murder. And then from all those together, you can deduce that God forbids abortion. You see, I don't have to find a passage that says explicitly God forbids abortion if I can actually show these premises are taught in the Bible. Then you get a logical deduction that God forbids abortion. Just like the Trinity, the Jehovah's Witness cult, and say, oh, where's the word Trinity in the Bible? The point is the doctrine of the Trinity is in the Bible, because it's God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. There's one God. Okay, the doctrine of the Trinity is in the Bible. Okay, even if the word is not. And guess what other word is not in the Bible? Bible. Okay, so let's look at some of these premises there. See, the biblical evidence goes, and we go right back to Genesis. You see, Rebecca, his wife, conceived, and the children struggled together with him. You see, in the womb, they're called children. In the Hebrew, banim means sons. So the sons struggled together within her. Not clumps of cells, they're called sons. Inside the womb, as well as outside the womb, there are banim outside, there's banim inside. So right from the beginning of the Bible, you've got evidence of the humanity of the unborn. Then you have this famous, the Annunciation. Just after the Annunciation, you have Mary going to visit his cousin Elizabeth. And when Elizabeth heard the greeting, the babe, which in Greek is brephos, leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit and said, blessed are you among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb. Why is it granted to me that mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the voice of your greeting sounded in my ears, the babe leapt in my womb for joy. So quite clearly, both the unborn Jesus and the unborn John the Baptist were human beings inside the womb. So the first one person to rejoice at the coming of Christ was actually the unborn John the Baptist, before the shepherds and before the wise men. Okay, and Jesus himself obviously was once an unborn baby. That's why I prefer the term virginal conception to virginal birth, because it's a conception that was miraculous. The birth was an ordinary birth. The conception was the miracle. But then so brephos was used of the John the Baptist in the womb. And then you got some interesting things to think about here. Some other evidence here. There's a few things to think about. I won't go into too much detail about this, but some things you got to see. You got body. The Bible tells a man as both material and immaterial. I won't go into body, soul, spirit sort of thing too much, but there's certainly an immaterial aspect of man. And as soon as biology, as life exists, you've got the body and the immaterial aspect there together, and death severs that unity. But in the new heavens and new earth, that will be back together again. In the intermediate state, our spirit goes to be with Christ, okay? But in the new heaven and new earth, we'll have resurrection bodies. Okay, so body-soul unity exists right from conception. And we see Psalm, in sin my mother conceived me, not conceived the clump of cells that later grew into me, okay? And Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified. So he's clearly anointing the unborn Jeremiah in this passage. Very, very clear statements here. Okay, so let's have a look at other things, some arguments here. Supposing you get the hard cases. Should a woman kill her children because she was raped? And the child's a reminder of the terrible rapist, the man who raped her. But in fact, what happens? What about, could you do that to a 5-year-old, you see? See, once you accept that the baby is human, try to substitute 5-year-old with unborn baby and see if the argument would work. Do we kill a 5-year-old child of a rapist because it reminds her of the rapist? You couldn't do it to a 5-year-old. Why? In the womb. If it's equally human, it doesn't make so. That's a good trick to do, actually. Substitute 2-year-old or 5-year-old for all the arguments the abortionist throws at you and see if they work. They don't. Which means you're getting them back to the key issue. What is in the womb? It's human. That's the key issue. And they always try to obfuscate that. But the point is, any woman would really do everything she could to protect her children from an abusive father. That's what a real woman would do, a real mother would do. And here's an interesting lady I know, Rebecca Kiesling. She was actually conceived by a brutal rape. So she's a mother herself, and she's a lawyer, qualified lawyer, Christian apologist, but she's also a pro-life activist. And the thing, she's actually been very effective at talking to politicians about why there should be no exception for rape, because she says, do I deserve the death penalty? She actually turned Governor Rick Perry of Texas around on this, because I think he was saying, well, we should allow the rape exception. So she said, well, what about me? I'm actually the conception. I'm not guilty of the crime. Why punish the child for the crime of the father? The Bible actually prohibits that, because it's very clear. The soul that sins shall die. The son shall not suffer for the iniquity of the father. It's very clearly against punishing the child for the sin of the father. And in fact, there's no death penalty for rape. Why should there be death penalty for the child of a rapist? So I think the rape exception just doesn't make any sense. And what about this little lie that you hear from certain people? I personally hate abortion, but... okay, let's look at this. Let's analyze this and show how bankrupt this is. The question is, why do you hate abortion? Tell me. You see, if it's just a clump of cells, there's no reason to hate it. Yeah, I mean, I've had a tumours removed or cysts removed. Why should I hate that? There's no moral issue behind it. There's no reason to morally hate it, is there? If it's a clump of tissue. The only reason to hate it is because it's a human being. But if it's a human being, it's no longer just between the woman and the doctor. That's the point of things, just to make them think about why they say what they do and show that it's really a morally bankrupt thing. It makes no sense to hate abortion unless it really is killing something. And the idea of imposing your morality, they're imposing their morality on what they've actually conceded as a human being then. So why should their atheistic evolutionary morality be imposed on the helpless unborn baby? Okay, and then I hate slavery, but I support the right to own slaves. Well, that's the same sort of argument, though. But I mean, just the pathetically immoral thinking that comes about with the terrible, with this horrible issue that's coming about is really coming to the forefront in the States just in recent weeks. Now, it's interesting also to go through a few other arguments here to make sure I've got some time to talk about there. Let's go to the infanticide thing. It's interesting. I don't think infanticide is always unjustifiable. I don't think it's plausible to think there's any moral change that occurs during the journey down the birth canal. Yeah, I agree with him. But he's doing it the opposite direction from me. He's saying, if you can kill him before, why not kill him afterwards? I'm saying, because you can't kill him afterwards, you shouldn't kill him before. But see, we accept the same premise, there's no difference, but he draws totally the wrong conclusion from it because his worldview doesn't believe in sanctity of life. And here's another atheist. Yeah, birth is arbitrary. And it's not been recognized that newborns were regarded as fully human. I've had a few, they weren't. Okay, well, that's a pretty bizarre thing. But it's interesting when you look at, there's a book by Nancy Pearcey called Love Thy Body. It's interesting how she goes through the early history of Christianity, where Christianity took hold in a culture, infanticide disappeared. Because the Romans and Greek culture were all big on infanticide of babies they didn't think were suitably fit enough, or sometimes there's a case, if it's a boy, raise it, if it's a girl, lay it on the hillside to die. So in fact, the population of girls grew up when Christianity took hold. Girls actually became more valued, and so did women, because both male and female are created in God's image. But before that, women were not valued, and girl babies were often left to die. And it's the same happens in places like India and China today, where you have sex-selected abortions, and they kill the baby girls. So a few different things I could be talking about. I've run out of time. I could talk about some... what else can I talk about? Anything? I mean, I don't want to run out of time. That's the only thing. I went too far on certain things, which is because of the recent events of New York. It sort of becomes more topical than other things. So I might just leave that open for questions. But I want to just mention some of the resources we have before I go into the question time. And one of them is the Creation magazine. Anyone familiar with the Creation magazine? Quite a few of you, oh, that's great. I mean, but a few of you need to learn because you're not quite familiar with it. And it's been going for 40 years. And it goes to over 100 countries around the world and actually has articles on these sorts of topics I've been talking about, of course, far more on the creation issue. But here's a great evidence of how it's a great witnessing tool, because here's a person who was given Creation magazine and he realized that evolution has no leg to stand on. And creation makes perfect sense. And every magazine, well, see, if God is true, if there is a God, I'm accountable to him. How can I be right with him? So every magazine presents the gospel. Then you have this one here. This lady was given Creation magazine. You see how it gets passed around. And she was hooked on it. And she had a way to help her defend her own faith, but also to teach her children the truth of creation and to witness to her friends. So she's really grateful for the magazine. And let's face it, it's not a question of whether to witness to your children and grandchildren, it's who is doing the witnessing. Someone is witnessing to your kids. That's why it's important to have the right sort of witnessing, which is why we have these forms here. I just want to explain, before the clipboards go around, I'll explain what you do with them. It's actually very inexpensive, because all you do is pay $7.50 every quarter. Every 3 months, we'll debit your credit card to $7.50, and you get the digital and the print version. So every 3 months it comes out. And we have to run your credit card or your check tonight, so we can actually have it on record. Okay, so I spend less than that when I go to Chick-fil-A for lunch. Okay, so $7.50 a quarter is what you do here. So put your name and your address so we can send the paper copy to you, but also the email, so we can send you the email details about how to get the digital version, and then take it off and pass the clipboard on to the next one. Go ahead and pass, guys. Thanks. And the thing is, the digital one's good, because I know there's quite a few you probably have kids and grandkids in different parts of the world. And the thing is, you can give them the digital code and they can get their own magazine on their smartphone or their laptop. Okay, so 5 different devices, and you can get some gifts here. And I know, since I'm speaking to the Lutheran church, I better explain it's the English meaning of gift, not the German meaning of gift, okay, for any German speakers here. The point is, you get a gift. It's the first issue of the Creation magazine you get today, but also you get 2 documentaries. You get this Darwin documentary, which we did for the bicentennial. It goes all around the world to the Galapagos voyage, explains what made him tick and how important it was, and how important it is to try and have the answers. But also Fallout. You see, Fallout's about how we interviewed kids from church homes at the universities and explain why are they still going to church, or why are they not going to church. Did they get creation teaching in their church? And it seems that creation teaching made a difference to whether they were still in the church. And here's an example of what's in the magazine. Here's a classic article called How do dating methods work? And this is not about how boys meet girls. It's about how old things are. And every magazine has an interview with a Ph.D. scientist, which might be interesting for those who've got kids going through high school. And the current issue, Dr. Lee Klammer is the star in the current issue. There you go. So it's very, very definitely worth getting. And also examples of biomimicry, where that's what the Apologetics Forum is holding biomimicry next month, where humans are copying design from nature. So it looks like a very interesting topic. There's even got kids sections here. Here's my little niece reading it with me here. Start them young, okay? And for the kids, we've got these packs here, which might be useful. If you've got kids or grandkids or Christmas or birthdays coming, you might find this pack of 5 kids' books a useful one. And just a few other things here. This is a very new book too. It's a biology curriculum guide. You see, I try and give you some new stuff, because we try and get new stuff for you, because I was here 2 years ago. And this is also one which is very like the one in the seminar coming up, called Inspiration from Creation. That's biomimicry, how humans are copying God's designs in the natural world, and saying, well, isn't it wonderful? How clever are these engineers? But the engineers are making the copies. What are the one who made the original they're copying from? And this book is sort of more general apologetics, called Christianity for Skeptics, about not just about the creation issue, but the idea of right and wrong. How do you defend ethics without God? It's just, you can't do it. As well as how do you answer false religions like Islam and Hinduism and atheism. So this is one of the books we have. And also a pack of DVDs. If you can't make it your mind, you might have this pack of 5 DVDs. So now I think it's a good time to ask some questions. The only rule I have in Q&A times is that what you say must end in a question mark.
All right. Let's give Dr. Sarfati a hand. So we'll take questions, and what I'd like you to do, if you have a question, raise your hand, and I'll come up and give you the microphone so we can hear it and have it recorded as well. And while you're thinking of that question, I want to remind you the way we support this ministry is through free will offerings. And the men will come around in a few minutes, and feel free to contribute. We do take tax-deductible donations as well. You do checks or online or in the donation box, what have you, whatever you're comfortable in doing. So, questions people might want to ask Sarfati.
This one here, yep. Oh, can I have my screen back on, please? I might need it for questions. Thank you.
Okay, when you mentioned the slavery issue,
yes,
I didn't hear you mention the fact that that was exactly the argument that in the Lincoln-Douglas debates.
Mm-hmm. What was the argument, sorry?
Lincoln-Douglas debate?
But what argument was in the Lincoln-Douglas debates? Forgive me as being a non-American, okay?
In the Lincoln-Douglas debates, slavery was a pro-choice argument made by Stephen A. Douglas.
Right, yeah, the Democrats were the party of pro-choice back then too, it seems, yes. That sounds right, yeah. But it's interesting there's also a man called Nat Henthoff who's a liberal atheist but a pro-lifer. Nat Henthoff said he became a pro-lifer by listening to Jesse Jackson. And Jesse Jackson said, don't let them dehumanize the unborn baby, because that was the trick they used to dehumanize the slaves. But of course, as he advanced politically, he abandoned his own argument, never refuted his own argument, and became a pro-abortionist. But he was very clear that the pro-abortion arguments are just like the pro-slavery arguments. And in fact, it was the Supreme Court who signed off on both slavery and the abortion. You see, the Supreme Court in Dred Scott v. Sandford, just before the Civil War, declared that black people didn't have human rights, were not real humans. See, Dred Scott versus Sandford, there you have Roe v. Wade, which says the unborn don't have human rights. You see, the Supreme Court was on the wrong side of both those arguments, and for much the same reasons too.
Are there questions people have that they would like to ask Dr. Sarfati? This is your chance.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. Sarfati. I was wondering, are you familiar with, I believe Barbara Marx Hubbard has said that, in a paraphrase, that Bible-believing Christians that don't want to get with the program and understand that we're all, as human beings, part of a large, unified cell, and they want to stick to this Bible thing. These are like cancer cells that have to be eliminated. Are you familiar with
I'm not familiar with that, but it certainly looks like there are certain people who've long wanted to eliminate the Bible. You've got the Chinese Communist government is actually ramping up its persecution of Christians. The Soviet communists and bulldozed churches, persecuted Christians, sent them to the Gulag. Okay, and it's interesting that I think atheists for a long time have wanted an excuse to marginalize Christianity, but I think it's the GLBT thing that's actually given the atheists an excuse to try to marginalize Christianity. We don't get on the gay, lesbian, transgender bandwagon. Oh, we're bigots, we have to be punished, we have to be fired from jobs, we have to be put in jail or fined and thrown out of business. I don't think they really care about the gay people either, because they're quite happy to do business in Islamic countries where they throw gays off buildings. Christians don't want to do that. We don't want to kill them, we don't want to persecute them, but it's the Islamic countries which will persecute them, and they're happy to do business with the Islamic countries. So I think they don't care about the gay people, that they use that as an excuse to marginalise the Christian people, is what they're doing. You think of the same people, the companies who do business in Saudi Arabia, where they recently executed, was it Iran or Saudi Arabia? They executed a gay man recently, and then, but you can't, North Carolina can't have girls only in girls' bathrooms. That's a sort of hypocrisy I see there. That's why I think it's not a pro-gay as much as an anti-Christian agenda that's going on there. And I think it's just the first the excuse they've been looking for in a long time to put Christianity underground. And don't think you'll be safe in churches, because the churches might be accused of being a bigoted organisation that has to be closed down. So if you think you can retreat to your churches and be safe, I think you're deluded. That's why I think it's a case we need to take back the culture. The culture has become so evolutionized. I think we need to take back the education system and the law courts. As the education system was founded by Christianity. The university was an invention of the Christianized Middle Ages, modelled on the theological colleges. It was the Christians who were at the forefront of learning at one time. It was the Christians who founded Harvard and Yale. The main universities of America were founded by Christians, and what's happened to them now? I think part of it is because there's been an anti-intellectual trend among some parts of Christianity of not loving God with all our mind, which is what Jesus told us, love God with all our minds. We need to recover that in the church, and hopefully use that to take back the culture that was basically taken from us, or we gave it away.
Okay, another question here.
Thank you again, Jonathan, for coming. You spoke on eugenics and infanticide and euthanasia. Can you address the newest phenomenon that happened in China of making humans?
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. We actually had an article on our website. I don't remember too much of the details about that, but I do remember there was an article. Some of my colleagues wrote an article on that very thing you're talking about, this CRISPR technology to try to rearrange the genes of something. Now, I can understand that might be okay in principle, as long as you don't kill babies to do it, you see. Any experimentation which actually involves destroying a fertilized human egg, okay, if it's fertilized, life has already begun. So any destruction of embryos is immoral, and therefore any technology which requires experimentation on embryos is not allowed. But I think, if there's a way of fixing a broken gene without killing anything, I'll be all right with that, because in fact God created Adam and Eve without any genetic defects. God created everything very good. So Adam and Eve would not have had genetic defects like we all have today. And I think when you think of Jesus on earth, he was undoing some of the effects of the curse. His healing miracles were undoing effects of the curse. See, sickness and lameness and blindness are parts of the curse, and he undid those things. So I think when we fix a broken bone, we're undoing effects of the curse and letting the body heal. So and then you can do surgery to fix cleft palates and things, and various other things. Do surgery, so why not genetic surgery? I think in principle you could do it as long as it doesn't harm another human being to do so. As a sort of a guideline I give you.
Another question here.
Yes, of course.
Are you familiar with what's going on in Vermont actually as of today in the legislature? Have you heard about that?
I have not, sorry.
Okay, they're trying to actually do even worse than New York and what Virginia's trying to do.
That's saying a lot.
It has passed through the House, it goes to the Senate, and the governor has already said he will sign it once it goes to the Senate.
Okay.
What it is, it's going to be no fault abortion, or in fact, it said no fault. You don't need any reason, no discussion with your doctor or anything like that. It's actually going to be no fault abortion, or obviously satisfied at any time.
Yeah, which is basically what it is anyway. So it's basically making it illegal what they've always done. See, it's interesting how they think the political climate is such that they can actually be open about what they believe. Before they were trying to sort of keep it under wraps what they believe because it might be too appalling for people, they might lose votes. But now they think the culture has become depraved enough that they can get away with these things. I mean, are they likely to lose the next election? Probably not, you know. I mean, as I just reminded, since we're talking about this sort of thing, you see, Milton Friedman, the great economist, said, I mean, it's not the way to change things is not necessarily to elect the right people, but to make it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right things. Yeah. So how can we make it politically profitable for even the wrong people to actually vote for pro-life laws? That's sort of up to the people of this country to make it profitable to be a pro-life person, to be pro-family, pro-life. And that's the way it should be. And make it politically suicide to be pro-abortion. It's interesting, like in Virginia, apparently the governor, it wasn't such much that he supported infanticide, but he wore blackface 35 years ago. Now, that's apparently worse than supporting infanticide now. That's warped political priorities. I'm not condoning blackface or anything like that, but 35 years ago, people can't change in 35 years. I'd hate to think of being held to account for something I did 35 years ago. I mean, not that I did blackface or anything, I promise you, but the thing is, what's worse, killing a baby or putting black makeup on you? There's a hierarchy of evil, honestly. There's some things are worse than other things, and killing a baby is right up there. Yes, so that's...
Okay, next question here.
Yes.
Dr. Sarfati, I don't believe I heard you mention the role of Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, who was the chief proponent of eugenics in this country for many decades. I
didn't mention her, but yeah, I've got an article on her actually. We've got a couple of, I jointly wrote one because this publication I call Churchianity Today, it was once called Christianity Today, but I think it seems to have departed so far from it. They did a praise piece of Margaret Sanger, would you believe, in Christianity Today. So we wrote a critique of it, but it's interesting that she actually opposed abortion. Even though Planned Parenthood is now in these minority areas to kill more babies being killed by Planned Parenthood than by lynching or by slavery, okay? But see, Margaret Sanger did not approve of abortion. I think she was genuinely opposed to abortion as a method of family planning, but she supported eugenics, definitely, and she was a racist. It's a very unsavory character, and she's the founder of Planned Parenthood, so it's got a very unsavory background, and that's why it's located in all these minority areas. It's a tragic thing that our taxpayers still support that thing. But yeah, she's a very, very complicated woman and a very, very pernicious woman, but it's really weird how she actually opposed abortion, you see. And it's interesting, the early feminists all opposed abortion too, and that's the interesting thing. The founders of modern feminism wouldn't recognize the feminists today because they thought abortion was child murder. They said so.
Okay, another question here.
I want to be a little bit careful with this question. I don't know if you've heard of this, and I don't believe everything I listen to online, but I did listen to a video, about a 20-minute video by a doctor from New York last week, and he said the reason these particularly eastern states with large populations want infanticide is because wealthy individuals have bought into this idea that they can exchange their plasma for young plasma. And young babies have between 30 and 34 ounces of plasma, and wealthy celebrities and stars will pay $8,000 to $30,000 for 30 ounces of young plasma, which gives them 3 to 6 months of feeling excellent or good. And they don't care how much it costs. They can buy units of plasma here and there. This isn't really a question, but I don't know if you've heard of that.
I haven't. I really can't comment on it. It seems like snake oil to me, but I mean, as well as the fact, of course, killing a baby to do it is just immoral. But I mean, Planned Parenthood's well known for selling baby parts.
They kill elk to get their antlers for,
Yeah, but they kill babies for their parts too. That's a terrible scandal that they're doing. But yeah, so why not the plasma as well? It's a horrifying thing to think of. But I can't comment. I don't know if it's true or not. I really couldn't tell you yes or no on that. I don't know the answer to that. Whether it's true or not, I mean.
Okay, if I don't see any more hands up,
Oh, wow.
one more back here.
I got a kind of a lighthearted question for you.
Oh dear.
I'm kind of curious. Have you read anything or come across anything? I don't like that in my mouth. Have you come across anything or read anything about African elephant, taking an African elephant and having to give birth to a woolly mammoth? Is that possible? How close are they doing that in science?
African elements and woolly mammoth, I think you need a lot of genetic engineering to do that. I think, aren't mammoths more closely related to the Asian elephants? I don't know much about the mammoth thing, but I think they're talking about can we actually clone a woolly mammoth, and you need probably an elephant's egg to do it. You see, you couldn't just have extract the DNA from the mammoth and hopefully put it back together because it's very fragmented. I'll be talking about that tomorrow, actually. The DNA fragments really quickly after death.
How about if it's frozen? Yeah, I've heard about the frozen in Siberia. That's not bad.
Yeah, but it's actually, even frozen is not enough, because you see, in biochemistry labs, they try and put it into liquid nitrogen, which is minus 200 Celsius, okay? And even that may not be enough. But so it's not frozen enough. It's still degraded, and it's not snap frozen, the woolly mammoths. And the thing is, not only do you have to have a DNA, you have to have the egg to provide the machinery for DNA to operate. I'll be talking about it tomorrow. That DNA doesn't copy itself. You need machinery to do it, and that's provided by the actual egg. So you have to have an egg of something closely related to the mammoth, which probably would be the Asian elephant. Maybe an African elephant, but probably the Asian elephant. You need an Asian elephant egg and mammoth DNA. And they would be the same created kind, I believe. So that's what would have to be done. Whether it can be done, I don't know. That's what would have to be done, though.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Of course.
Okay, well, let's bring the Q&A to a close and thank Sarfati for his presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, just to wrap things up here, if we could move to the next slide. Yeah, this is the last slide here. Just again, to remind you, there's a guy named Dr. Laclama who's going to speak here next month. And the challenge I'd like to make to evolutionists and unbelievers is this here. How do you explain life from non-life? And I would submit that there are 4 reasons why that doesn't work. And I have challenged evolutionists, atheists with this. Nobody has come back with a reasonable answer. So come and hear that, my arguments, and then challenge your friends with the arguments, see how they question that. So again, on the back table, there's flyers on upcoming events. There is a trifold on the Apologetics form itself. If you don't have one of those, pick them up. And just to wrap things up, there's tables back there. There's Sarfati's table. He's got a lot of interesting books there. And there's the usual Apologetics form tables as well. Some freebies on there that you can pick up. And just to remind you, tomorrow, it's going to rain all day. And therefore, you will want to go to Mount Vernon, to Emmanuel Baptist Church, because that's where things are happening tomorrow. Sarfati will be speaking at the mini conference, those 2 lectures, and then in the afternoon, after lunchtime, he will challenge people to play chess. And we already have 45 people signed up to play. We'll have 30 boards set up so we can just play them sequentially. And so if you're interested in playing, he can probably handle a few more. But even if you're not interested in playing and you want to see how he plays, you're welcome to be a spectator and a cheerleader as well. So keep that in mind. There's nothing better to do tomorrow anyway, so you might as well be there. Okay, and the last thing I want to mention is that the Apologetics Forum also sponsors creation tours. And there's a young man in the back, just put up your hand, Ron. He leads these tours, and there's a write-up on that on the back table. Pick up one if you might have an interest, you or somebody in your group, and talk to Ron about that during the break here. So that's it. That's what I have for this evening. Thank you again for coming out and participating. And we hope that you've all benefited from this and have learned something new that you can share with your friends, family, colleagues, etc.